This past week, the world lost a true hero. Neil Armstrong was literally a man who had gone where no man had gone before. His heroic actions inspired not only me, but a majority of the planet. And to his friends and family, I'd like to share my sincere condolences and wish him well on his next adventure. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. Hope you're having a great day. I have got a great show for you, and there is just a lot of information to cover. And the first thing I want to talk about is Typhoon Bolivar. Now, a lot of people were concerned on Twitter, and I got lots of messages asking if I was okay. And I really want to say thank you so much for your concern. Typhoon Bolivar really was a non-issue up in the Seoul area. Now, down in Jeju, where the typhoon was its strongest and it went over the island, there were a number of deaths, some significant property damage. But as it moved northward, it swung a little bit to the west and slowly lost some of its power. In fact, by the time it actually reached Seoul, it was nothing more than a gust of wind. And when I say a gust of wind, I really believe in the past 2 or 3 years we've had stronger rainstorms, stronger monsoons. The gusts that I saw here in Dongtan were maybe 20 kilometers at best, maybe 30 kilometers at best. Insignificant rainfall. It was a complete non-event, and I'm very thankful for that. However, along the coast where the typhoon was its strongest because of the wind, because of its proximity to water, there were some other coastal areas that were hit, that did lose power, that did have some damage. But thankfully, the Korean government and the Korean services really did a good job about making sure people were prepared for if this had been a very dangerous storm, people would have been taken care of, and the government was mobilized and ready for it. So I'm very thankful for that. It did impact classes here in the Seoul area. A lot of schools canceled classes. In fact, I was literally on my way out the door to teach my evening classes when I got the word that classes were canceled. By that time, it was pretty much evident that the storm wasn't going to be that dangerous, but so many people had opted to take the day off that holding classes was just really a moot point. There was no point in going in to teach a class when everyone was going to be absent. So that was great news. Also, an update from last week. Todd Akin is off the Science Committee. If you remember, Todd Akin is the Republican legislative personnel in the United States who said that women can't get pregnant because if they are victims of legitimate rape, there's a mechanism to shut that down. And apparently people wanted to shut him down, and he's off the Science Committee. I am jazzed about that. But that does not mean that stupidity is absent from the United States. A New Hampshire sheriff says that he is prepared to use deadly force to prevent abortions. He thinks that abortions are unlawful but legal, and it's his job to legally prevent abortions. What is going on here? You can't have it both ways, dude. You can't have something be unlawful but legal. It's the same thing. So the Korean Constitutional Court unfortunately recently upheld their ban on abortions and okayed punishing doctors and other personnel who assist in giving them. And I really think that's unfortunately a huge step backwards. like I've said before, I'm a huge champion of women's reproductive rights, and having global bans on abortion is just the wrong way to go. In cases of rape, in cases of incest, in cases of just abuse, and in some cases severe genetic problems, to have the parents not have that as an option, I think is a crime. I think people really need to understand the medical reasoning of why it may be in the child's best interest to be aborted, and also the families. In cases in Arizona, there's a law that went into place that pretty much banned all late-term abortions, even if they were quote-unquote medically necessary. There was a family who had a child with a severe genetic problem that typically when that child is born, they only live a day or two, and they were unable to move through the system, or I should say, will be unable to move through the system to have the physician carry out a medically sanctioned abortion because the law is in place. So they have to spend the money, they have to go through the emotional heartbreak of carrying a child to term only to watch that child die a day or two later after birth. And I don't care how much counseling the state provides to a family, it's heart-wrenching, especially when it can be avoided. It's just wrong. In other political news back in the United States, Mitt Romney has, of course, now been deemed the official nominee for president on the Republican ticket, but he pulled a new low in my opinion. Last week he said, "No one has ever asked to see my birth certificate. They know that this is the place that I was born and raised." And I think that statement speaks volume to what his character is, as well as his philosophy towards Americans. And I say that on two different levels. Number one, if you look at the population in the United States, you have Caucasians, number one. You have black individuals, African Americans, number two. Number three, you have individuals of Latin descent or Hispanics. Number four, you have members of the indigenous population of the Americas. And number five, you have immigrants from Asia. So you have 5 different population groups. Now, Mitt Romney is a white guy. So taking this statement infers that he believes only white people belong in America. On a different note, it completely ignores the fact that as of earlier this year, it came out that now more than 50% of newborns in the United States belong to those other 4 population groups. Caucasians are now the minority in the United States, and this clearly shows that he is out of touch with the racial makeup of the United States. It is a sad, sad state that this is the person that is going forward on the Republican ticket. I really, really don't like that. And I really don't like the fact that he's bringing up the whole birther issue again with Obama. Time and time again, it's been settled. It's a moot issue. But it also brings up another interesting aspect with Mitt Romney. I anticipate he's going to ask more questions about Obama's birth and birth certificate and ask him to provide those documents. However, he's still avoiding the issue of his own personal taxes. And I saw a report earlier this week that really made me think about why. You see, a while back, Mitt Romney was on the board and owned shares in a company called Stericycle. Now, Stericycle is a company that disposed of aborted fetuses. So, if it's true that he either owns stock in Stericycle. It means that he's making a lot of money off of abortion. Or he sold the stock interest in it and he made a lot of money. Either way, Mitt Romney's funds, his riches, came from abortion. And what a lot of pundits are saying is that if that is absolutely true, then him taking political heat for not showing his taxes is the lesser of two evils. And I really think with as much problem as the taxes have caused for the Republican Party, as the abortion issue has caused for the Republican Party, that they can just do a better job. You don't need to have this kind of issue moving forward. Women's reproductive rights should be a non-issue. It should be settled. It should have been settled with Roe v. Wade, and it should be settled around the globe. Moving on to another issue that should be settled around the globe, I'm talking about Lance Armstrong. Now, it came out that Lance Armstrong is dropping his contention with the U.S. Anti-Doping Association case. Now, the U.S. ADA has come out and said that Lance Armstrong is a doper and he should have no Tour de France medals. He should have no gold medals, just medals from the Olympics. He should be stripped of everything and banned from professional sports. Well, I disagree. And let me tell you why I disagree. When you take a look at the US ADA, it's a quasi-governmental agency. It doesn't oversee cycling on the international stage, and the one organization that does pertain to cycling in the United States is the USA Cycling. And that also is the official organization that is part of the U.S. Olympic Committee. So you have the U.S. ADA making statements about Lance Armstrong, making policy decisions about his status as a Tour de France winner and his medal status without really having the authority. Now, Lance Armstrong has come out and said that he once wanted to participate in the inquiries to show his innocence, to really put this to bed once and for all. After all, we're talking about Lance Armstrong, who has passed more than 500 drug tests, who has passed both scheduled and random tests, and never once had any of the results called into question. We're also talking about Lance Armstrong, who repeatedly asked to confront the evidence that's being compiled against him by the US ADA and has never seen it. Even the International Cycling Union has said, we want to see the evidence. We want to see what this case is all about because we don't really buy into it. Now, the International Cycling Union has said that, okay, if there's going to be a legitimate inquiry into Lance Armstrong, it needs to be in our bailiwick. The US ADA won't give up. So, I think Lance Armstrong is right in this. There's no need to fight a fight that is so one-sided, that's so going to be railroaded. I'm not sure what is going on with the US ADA, but Lance Armstrong did a great job in stating his case and then coming out with his attorneys saying that because this wasn't a fair inquiry, even though I really disagree with the judge's decision. He filed an injunction against the ADA and the federal courts tossed it out. They said it didn't meet all the merits. Now, the judge that did throw it out did say that he had several constitutional concerns about the case. But that's another fact. That's done with. But his Lance Armstrong's attorneys said that if the ADA comes out and essentially does something that it doesn't have the ability to do or slanders his name, they will sue the organization for libel. And I really think that is where this particular case in the United States is going to move forward. And it's really, really sad that number one, it's gotten this far, and number two, it's not being contested in the appropriate forum, which is the ICU or the USA Cycling Committee. In other news, academic news, McAfee, the virus maker software folks, reported that 48% of U.S. teens have cheated on tests or assignments by going online. 22% did that by using their mobile phones. And I really think that shows a lot on the status of U.S. education. Why the U.S. rates the U.S. is ranked so low. In the latest PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment report, it compares 15-year-olds across 70 different countries. The U.S. was ranked 14th out of 34 countries in the modern economic environment. In reading, 17th in science, and a really dismal 25th for mathematics. Now, unfortunately, this behavior is not unique to the United States. I see a lot of Koreans in my classes also using their mobile phones for, in English class, they use it to cheat on tests by looking for an answer. Not so much a picture of the book, but say there's a vocabulary or a section of the test related to a grammar point, and they'll sneak a look at their phone to get the answers. And I really think it's sad. A lot of people now growing up are being instilled with a different set of values, I feel. I really think that a lot of people look at the ends and believe that the ends justify the means rather than self-worth and doing yourself and putting in the work along the way. People are always looking for the shortcut, and I really think that's a shame, especially in work, but more so in education. Education is about developing your mind. It's about developing yourself as a person. And I really, really hope that both in the United States and in countries around the world, that hard work ethic can be instilled once more. Let's take a look at copyright news, shall we? Because that was a big week. Let's start off with Sony versus Tenenbaum. And this was the case where Sony sued a music downloader. And it's been going back and forth. The new judge in the case has now upheld the original fine for $22,500 per file illegally downloaded and sided with the RIAA. Now, this meant that these songs that could have been purchased online for 99 cents are now being valued at almost $23,000, which is ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. You have to take a look at what the value of the work is, what it retails for in the marketplace, and that's how you come up with a fair punitive amount. It's just ridiculous that that's gone that far. And an example of that can be seen in the U.S. and, I should say U.S., the Apple and Samsung case. Now, here in Korea, as well as many places around the globe, you have a just ridiculous patent lawsuit going back and forth between these two companies. I say it's ridiculous because all these companies are trying to position one another to block the other party from selling goods in their countries. In Korea, the decision I thought was rather interesting. The judge in the case found both Apple and Samsung violating each other's patents. Apple had to pay $35,000 to Samsung, and Samsung had to pay $25,000 to Apple. And both companies were then banned from selling their older legacy products. For example, the iPhone 3, 3G, and I believe the 4, and the Apple iPad 1 and 2, and Samsung was prevented from selling the Galaxy S2 and some of the older phones. So that's pretty fair, okay? You both infringed on each other, you both pay a slight fine, and the legacy products can't be sold. Problem solved. You take that to the United States, $1.05 billion, and a landslide victory to Apple. And really, is that what is a fair verdict? Now, if you look at the design of the Samsung devices, yeah, there's just some similarities there, but is it really worth $1.05 billion? And if you even take the iPad design, I still think it looks like a Star Trek pad. And Paramount and Star Trek should have won that lawsuit. The thing I'm really interested about the US decision is when the next iPhone comes out, when the next iPad comes out, how is that going to affect worldwide markets where Samsung is? Because now Samsung and Apple are now trying to prevent the sale of their smartphones in different countries. And people here in Korea look at the verdict with astonishment. Number one, because a jury who are not technical made the decision. It seems very one-sided. It seems like a lot of money. And it really doesn't address... A lot of people think that, okay, Samsung was inspired by the design of the Apple products, but is that enough to really violate a patent? Can you really patent an idea like that? I've always looked at some of these patents that are passed through the U.S. Patent Office, and I think to myself, why is that being awarded a patent? I remember when Amazon got a patent for a one-click sale, and that to me just seemed ridiculous, that the notion of clicking on one link and having that take you to your checkout cart, to have the ownership of that idea was just ridiculous. But that's just me. It'll be interesting, as I said, to see how these things are going to come out in the marketplace. I really think that now Apple and Samsung are going to really try and just kill each other in every single country, ramp up the legal fees, ramp up the punitive damages, and it's all going to be about delaying or banning the sale of devices in those target countries. The other thing that came out this week, which I was kind of concerned about in the United States, there was a PhD student named Arijit who was banned from a Delta flight for wearing a shirt that mocked the Transportation Safety Administration, the TSA. Going through the airport, he was screened several times and ultimately booted off the airline. And the reason why I bring this up is last time I spoke about the MAP 21 rule. We have a lot of laws being passed that diminish the civil liberties in the United States, and this is clearly an example of that. Simply because he wore a shirt that's protected by the First Amendment, criticized and made fun of the TSA, because those in the transportation industry didn't like that, he was penalized at the airport and then prevented from flying. That is going too far. And as we move into the election cycle, I hope Americans realize that you have the ability to choose the leaders. Those that are in government work for the population. It is a representative government. And what's happened is special interests have taken the politicians, and that's who they now represent. You need to take back the government. You need to make sure that those that are elected into office, it doesn't matter what party, those that are elected in office do the work of the people, that do the work for the people. That's what the government is supposed to be. A great decision that is going to improve some civil liberties here in Korea was that the Korean Constitutional Court struck down the real name verification law as being unconstitutional, citing problems with both foreigners and travelers. This is awesome. And let me tell you why this is awesome. A few years ago, to kind of protect speech, the government of Korea instituted the policy that if a website received more than 100,000 hits per month. Users had to sign up to leave comments on that system with their national ID card and their real name. The thought being that we're going to verify who you are and it'll stop libel speech. It went away with anonymity, and as a result, you really had a diminished amount of free speech because you were afraid then to actually speak your mind because you had no cloak. A lot of people here in Korea, when something is stated online, are verbally attacked by netizens or trolls, and some violent behavior has come about of it. It's also caused problems with foreigners because some sites require you to sign up with an ID, and the sites really aren't geared for the foreigner numbers. Or if you're just traveling in the country, you don't have an ID, so you can't make use of the website. And a lot of these websites deal with, say, ticket sales for trains, buses, for special features, for concerts. You can't sign up for it because you have no ID. With that gone, it opens up the door, and hopefully this will mean a lot more access for people around Korea, a lot more business coming into Korea for travel. And I'm also really jazzed about that because I really hope that this means that YouTube will finally enable comments for the Korea pages on YouTube. When I was first here in 2008, I was just jazzed that I could set my homepage to Korea, and as editors in Asia would flag videos for features, I'd be exposed to great content homegrown here in Korea. But with the real name verification law, Google and YouTube precedingly did voluntarily remove the ability to leave comments. So I never went to the Korea pages anymore. And even now, if your browser gets reset and you go to South Korea as your country page, you can't leave a comment. So your default goes to, well, yeah, your default. You then default either to the worldwide view or some other view, and you miss out on content. So I'm really happy that's back. I'm really excited to see that put into place so I can finally find some awesome content on YouTube. A couple other issues here in the region. Japan's Noda, he said he will not acknowledge the comfort women issue. He says that there is no evidence supporting that Japanese military personnel during the occupation period of the peninsula used Korean women as sex slaves. And I have to say, bogus dude. There is a substantial amount of information. There's first-hand information by those that are surviving. Unfortunately, this is a characteristic I see a lot of times with elder people from Japan of revisionist history. It's not something unique to Japan. A lot of countries have different views of how things went, but in this case, you need to look at the facts and you need to acknowledge it. And one of the greatest things I really think that shows this about how a lot of times Japan looks at the past is when you take a look at, say, the Philippines and QiRanger. There's a great tour on the island of QiRanger, but there is very much a international tour and a Japanese tour. And the information that is shared on the Japanese tour is very, very different than what is shared on the international tour. There's no mentions of the war crimes that are committed, and there's no mentions of the Japanese soldiers committing suicide. It's always reference to how brave they were and how they did a good job. So I really think that Noda needs to really do the right thing and acknowledge the past wrongdoings so that both Korea and Japan can move forward. However, I will say that when Noda says that no further compensation will be provided to these women, I think he's pretty much on the right track there. The reason why I say that is because when the two countries normalized relations, there was a treaty and there was a payment by the Japanese government to South Korea where they acknowledged wrongdoings, where they acknowledged that this payment that we're giving South Korea is compensation for everything that we did during the occupation period. So Korea took that money and do with it whatever they want to do with it. But Japan is right to say that we've already paid. We've already compensated for that. And even if there was compensation, it really is never going to be enough. I mean, how can you put a dollar sign on being victimized that way? You just can't. So I really think that an earnest apology, which is what the women want. They don't want a regret. Oh, we regret what happened. They want the sincere apology. And unfortunately, I don't think they're ever going to get it, because in Japan's mind, they have said all the apologies that they're going to make for the occupation period. And if Noda's views are shared by others, they're ignoring the topic completely. On another issue that I like to bring up, South Korean government is going to pay families for atrocities that they committed during the Korean War. The court has ordered the government to pay up to 40 million won, which is about $35,000, to about 500 families who filed a lawsuit. Now, this lawsuit stems with the government killing members that were sympathetic to North Korea during the Korean War. And it really sounds like a great win for these families, because you're essentially having the government pay reparations for executing members that were sympathetic to the other side. However, when you do the math, it's about $70, a little over $70 per family that they get back, which I think is a slap in the face. It's really unfortunate that that's the amount that's being given back. But at least the government is being held accountable for summarily executing folks during the Korean War. I think that's a good move. I think it's a brave move for the government to acknowledge that. I really believe that in a time of war, a lot of stuff gets done, and the only way to move forward with normal relations is to really, really just air the dirty laundry and do what's right to make everyone come back to the table and openly discuss it. So that is this week's news. A lot to cover. Moving on to the content rewind this week. Well, we talked a lot about questions, and one of the things I'm very happy to do is always take the time out to answer questions from listeners, from viewers, from readers. And that's why I have the questions@QiRanger.com email address, so people can leave questions through their messages there, or they can send it to me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. A lot of times I will try to get back to them as quickly as possible, but every now and then it takes a little time. But this past week, I did a video on gluten-free options in Korea, how teacher pay works in Korea, about banking in Korea, and certain visa issues come up in Korea. And all the links will be in the show notes, and they're all on the QiRanger vlog channel. A lot of great questions, and I really love being able to do that. It's really my hope to at least be able to answer one or two questions every single week by those that are interested in about life in Korea, travel in general, teaching English as a second language. If you have questions, please send those in there. If you have questions about recording, or if you have questions about travel video, I would love to answer those as well. It's one of the reasons why on the next segment we're going to talk about cameras, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I really think that there are some great questions that aren't being asked, because a very famous statement in the classroom is there are no such things as dumb questions. The only dumb question is the one that isn't asked. So taking the time out to type out a quick message is a fantastic way to me to get my attention, and for me to either write a quick response or to answer it. The last blog I put up over on QiRanger.com was about Cameron's coffee, and I need to say again, thank you so much, Jason, for giving me this lovely blend of coffee. Now, as you know, I love coffee, so I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about this coffee because there was no video. The blog article, I don't think, really captures the essence of how cool this coffee was. So here's the story. In 2009, a bunch of us got together in Las Vegas. We were members of another social site. We got together, partied, watched the Super Bowl, just had a lot of fun. So since I had family in Las Vegas, I wasn't sure when we're going to go back to the United States again. So I wanted to make a point to go visit my family since I grew up with them. They're very close cousins. And I put it out there to my friends. Hey, we're going to be in Las Vegas for these 4 days. Would you like to come? Every single person said yes. And before long, we had this awesome Facebook thread about where we're going to stay, what can we do, some fantastic things about it. And Jason and his wife, Patricia, and just so you know, Patty's really, really good at matching with friends. She's a star at that. I digress. So Patty and Jason are from Minnesota, and he also shares my love for coffee. So they were going to come in, and they were delayed, and then we picked them up next morning. As they joined our crew in our villa, he presented myself and another friend, Rick, who also loves coffee, with the Highlander grog. And a lot of times if you go out and you buy specialty coffee, you'll find that when you squeeze the beans in the bag, you get a soft aroma. You get a very little amount. You get a hint at what the coffee is going to taste like, but it's not very pungent. When he presented the bag of the Camerons to us, you didn't have to squeeze the coffee to find out how much flavor was going to be in these beans. These beans just had a ton of flavor. It was unreal. And he kept on asking me, had I made it yet? Had I made it yet? Had I made it yet? Because we were in Vegas for 4 days. The villa had its own coffee maker, so there was no issue with that. So I was waiting until I really came back to Korea. I was thinking about making it in Arizona when I was staying with our family there, but I really wanted to relish it here at home. So this last week, I finally broke down and opened the glorious bag. The one thing that I really can't even begin to describe is how much caramel you can smell from these beans. It is such an overpowering aroma that I really thought this was going to be some kind of caramel macchiato type latte bean. I really felt the name Highlander grog was a bit of a misnomer. Looking at the company's website, it had butterscotch, it had rum, had hints of nut. And I really got none of that from the aroma. However, as I brewed the coffee, the aroma gave way to a slightly different bouquet. It had a softer side, and as you sipped it, it had a rich, spicy flavor, which I assume came from the combination of the rum and the butterscotch. In the back of the throat, there was a spicy spike, which I think came from the nuts. The flavor was amazing. It was rich, it was bold, it was indicative of what you would think would come from the Highlands. It was a great, great coffee. And Cameron's has an assorted amount of both roast and flavorful coffee. And I have to say that I need to go pick some up and have it shipped here again because I love this blend. It's amazing. So that is the content rewind. Jason, thanks again for the awesome, awesome coffee. As I mentioned before, this week's Quintessential Quartet is about cameras and specifically What is the best camera ever? Number one, the best camera ever, that is the camera that you have with you right now. It's an old saying, whatever camera you have on you is the best camera. And I really, really believe that. It doesn't matter if it's a $10,000 SLR. It doesn't matter if it's a digital SLR or a film camera. It doesn't matter if it's a crappy point and shoot that you picked up at a garage sale for $2. You cannot take a picture unless you have a camera. By having a camera with you ensures the ability to capture the memory, to capture the image. And that's why it's the best one ever. Number two, Canon versus Nikon. It's an age-old debate, and there are certainly individuals on both sides of the fence. I tend to like Canon products because I'm familiar with the user interface. I've used them for long periods of time. It doesn't mean that I don't like Nikon products. I've actually used a few Nikon products over time. What I have found is that in large, Nikon and Canon cameras are essentially the same. There may be pluses and minuses on each individual models. Some Canon cameras may be better than some Nikon cameras and vice versa, but largely the cameras are the same. Where you get into heavily investing in either Canon, Nikon, and today you have Sony and other manufacturers, is when you buy a DSLR. Once you buy a DSLR, you're making a commitment to that brand, to that camera, because bodies are relatively cheap. Where you spend gobs and gobs of money are on lenses. And that's where you have to make the decision, is if you're going to look at either a Canon or a Nikon, look at how much you're going to spend on lenses. What kinds of lenses do you want, and how much money do they cost? Because, like I said, the cameras are virtually about the same. The lenses are about the same. It's about the money at the end. So go with your pocketbook on that one. Or if there is a clear winner, go with that camera. Don't let the name drive the decision. Number three, point and shoot cameras. A lot of people these days are focusing so much on DSLRs, they're ignoring point and shoot cameras. I love point and shoot cameras. I have a DSLR. I've had a DSLR since 2005, and it takes awesome, awesome pictures. It's a Canon 20D, in fact. But I don't take that camera everywhere I go. In fact, I rarely use it because I want a simple picture. I want the camera with me right now, and a lot of times that's my iPhone. We have the GoPro, which I'm filming on right now, which is waterproof. It allows me to have something very compact that's quick to access, quick to take the picture, and captures the moment and makes it available to share on different platforms with my friends and my family. I really think that if you're looking at a camera and you're not interested in learning about depth of field, about changing lenses, about the nuances of photography as an art, I really think you should stick with a point and shoot camera. It's going to do what you want it to do, and that's to take snapshots, to take pictures. And a lot of these point and shoot cameras have full manual control, so it has all the features of an SLR, but it's tiny. And you can fit it in your purse. You can fit it in your pocket. You can fit it in your backpack and take it with you. And number four, let's talk about video cameras. Now, I am a firm believer, and there are a lot of people out there that love the way DSLRs shoot video. And they do take fantastic video. But, in my opinion, if you primarily want to shoot video, the best camera is still a video camera. DSLRs have come a long way, but there are still a lot of shortfalls in them as a whole. And I really think that if you are serious about taking video, then get a video camera. Those are the best for the job. So there you have it. Quintessential Quartet. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time once more to set course for adventure, and I am excited to have on the line with me, all the way from down under in Australia, Mr. Nathan Brown of Wes Wanders. Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Steve.
I have been looking forward to this for a long time because even though I'm here in Korea, you are going to take us to a very magical place not far from where I am, but I have never been. So where are you going to take us today?
Today I'm going to be talking about Kyoto over in Japan.
So why does Kyoto have a special place in your heart that you want to talk about?
Well, first up, so I only started really traveling about 2 years ago, and I was always interested in Japan. I think watching way too many Japanese cartoons when I was probably did it, which it always does. So Japan was one of the first places on my list. So I went to Singapore first, met up with a few friends. But yeah, Japan was the first place that I travelled solo. So yeah, I think it was the first place that I fell in love with solo travel and just travel in general. So yeah, it just holds a special place in my heart because of that.
So you mentioned you watching, say, anime and some Japanese programming. What anime really captivated you with Japanese culture and fostered that desire to visit the country in person?
Can you repeat the question? You're breaking up a little, sorry, Steve.
Oh, no worries. So, you mentioned that you were watching some anime and it really enamored you with Japanese culture and instilled that desire to go to the country. What anime or programs really instilled that desire?
I watched a few back in the day. So Dragon Ball Z I watched a lot of, and probably a little bit of Naruto as well. So I think so Naruto kind of shows a bit more of the ancient Japanese feel, I think.
Okay.
So all those buildings and stuff like that just really appealed to me, and they're just a very interesting culture, I think.
All right. Very cool. So what can you tell us about Kyoto itself?
So Kyoto is probably around about the middle of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about 3 hours by bullet train southwest of Tokyo, and I think about an hour from Osaka. So you can fly into both those places. And it's not a small place. It's got a population of about 1.5 million. But I think what really appealed to me in Kyoto was it's got a really good mix of old Japan and new Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of ancient temples. There's heaps of UNESCO listed temples there. But it still has the new technology feel of Japan with vending machines on nearly every corner and all that.
Very cool. What about the weather? Is it very hot in the summertime, or is it kind of temperate throughout the year?
I think in summer it's fairly temperate. When I went, it was October, so autumn or fall. So the leaves were turning, and it looked amazing. So Kyoto is one of those places that has 4 very distinct seasons. So you can tell that it's winter, you can tell that it's summer. Spring, you've got the cherry blossoms all coming up. So I don't know which of the seasons I'd like to spend the most time with. I think I'd like to do a whole year there,
Oh,
test them all out.
oh, okay. Now you mentioned taking the bullet train in either from Tokyo or Osaka, but are there any other ways to get into Kyoto?
Um, I'm sure there is. I don't know if you can fly there direct. You can fly into Osaka and Tokyo, and you can probably get a domestic flight to Kyoto from there. But yeah, I got the train because, well, Japan's train system's really good, and as a tourist, you can get like a 7, 14, or 21 day pass, which means you can ride the train as much as you want. Because in Japan they do it over distance, so the longer you go, the more it's going to cost you.
Sure.
So if you've got this unlimited train ticket, you can, just go wherever you want.
Now,
It's very convenient.
Now, can you pick that up in in Japan, or do you have to buy that overseas before you get to Japan?
You have to. Well, as far as I know, I bought mine when I was still in Australia, because I don't think you can get them while you're there, because it is a tourist thing.
Right.
They don't let locals get it. So you have to purchase it within 3 months of travelling there, and then when you get there, you validate it, and
You're off.
they give you your ticket then.
Okay. Cool. So you mentioned staying there, and you were thinking about staying for up to a year if you had the opportunity. What about what are some places where you can stay in Kyoto?
So when I went there, obviously solo traveller, so I had to go to a hostel because that's what my budget allowed me at the time. The one I stayed at, can't for the life of me remember what it's called. If I was in Kyoto again, I could walk straight there from the train station.
So it left that much of an impression on you.
Yeah. Well, I think because it was the first place that I went to as well, so just walking around, I'm one of those people that, walking around, I'll pick up where I need to go really quickly. So, and it just kind of sticks in my memory.
Gotcha. Now, as far as hostels, as a solo traveler, would you recommend staying in a dormitory or splurging for a private room in a hostel?
I stayed in a dorm. I didn't have any problems with it. I think it was a 6-person dorm. But I'm a very heavy sleeper, so I don't think I've ever stayed in a private room in a hostel because I just don't need to.
Gotcha.
But I think they do get kind of pricey. I think because accommodation is a little bit tricky there at times. So, and Japan's expensive to start with. So, I would go the dorm room. But if you can afford it, private, I guess.
Okay.
Depends on your choice.
Okay. What about other places to stay in Kyoto?
So Kyoto is kind of famous for Rockians or Ryokans. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but they're the ancient kind of traveller kind of places to stay. So they have the futon beds and the tateyama mats. You kneel around a table and they bring you dinner and eat as a group. They've got the nice gardens out the back, and so you're pretty much just staying in someone's house is kind of what a Rockian's about. Sometimes they'll have the warm baths and stuff as well.
Oh, nice.
I would have loved to have stayed in one, but because they're a bit more pricey than hostels as well. I just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah, I can imagine. We have similar places here for homestays that are a little bit more expensive, where you can get dinner and you can get breakfast, but I think it's on the lines of would be probably 75,000 won, which is close to $75 Australian dollars per person per night. So if you're traveling with a couple, you could just go out to get a nice motel at that point, or if you're going by yourself, you can actually get a love motel and have a really nice stay as well. Speaking of love motels, did you see any love motels while you were in Kyoto?
Not that I can remember. The only one I remember was in Tokyo. They charged in 3-hour lots. I thought that was pretty classy.
Well, there's one not too far from us, and they do 2-hour lots. When I got back from my summer vacation, I was the apartment had been shut down for the 6 weeks, so it was just too hot to stay in there. So I went to the Love Motel by us, and you had the all night option, or you had the 2-hour option, which I thought was funny. Speaking of hotels, a lot of times my friends who travel around within Japan opt for capsule hotels. Did you stay in one during your time in Japan?
Yeah, my first night in Japan, I stayed in one in Tokyo. I think it was in Shinjuku. Kind of freaked me out to start with, because I thought, capsule hotel, that sounds like fun. But the place where it was kind of dodgy. I suppose that's why they put them there, because the guys go out after work, go for a drink, go to strippers, and then just crash. So I was just walking around, and people trying to pull me into their places for a show. Didn't speak the language, so it was an interesting first night in Japan.
Oh, I can imagine. As far as the sleep went for that capsule hotel, would you say that you got a better night's sleep at the hostel in terms of bedding, or did you get a comparable sleep in the capsule hotel?
I'd say it was about equal. Actually, in the capsule complex, it's pretty cool, because you drop off your bag and all your clothes, and they give you like a barcode wrist strap. Mm-hmm. So if you want to buy anything like a drink from the vending machine or a massage, anything like that, they just scan your barcode and then you pay when you're leaving.
Oh, that's quite convenient.
Yeah, so you just go up in your dressing gown, you go up to the hot baths, watch some TV, have an onsen, which is weird for the first time, and just go back to your capsule, watch some TV, because they've got TVs in the capsule, and just have a snooze.
Very cool. Now, for those listening to the podcast who don't know what an onsen is, what's the best way to explain that to someone, to the uninitiated?
So an onsen's kind of like a warm public bath, essentially. Very weird for the first time, because like coming from a Western culture, you don't really want to nude up in front of a bunch of men very often, but it's perfectly normal over there. So that's what you do. You jump into the bath. It's about 41 degrees, the water, which is pretty nice.
It is pretty nice. Here in Korea, they're called saunas or jjimjilbangs, and we do that quite often. It's quite enjoyable.
I would agree.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Speaking of Kyoto and things to do, what are some of the activities that you did while there?
So Kyoto has a whole bunch of stuff to do. They have, I think from memory, it's a bit over 2,000 temples and shrines.
Did you visit them all?
I wish. I was going through the temple list. There's about 88 temples in and around the area. And I think they've got a map so you can go to all of them if you want.
Oh my gosh.
So I was only in Kyoto for 4 days, unfortunately. So I planned to go to about 20, So I picked about 20 of my favourite.
Mm-hmm.
I got nowhere near that. I think out of the 20 that I picked, I probably went to about 4. Yeah.
About 20%'s not too bad.
Yeah. It just means I can go back and do the rest.
Absolutely. What else is there to do in Kyoto?
One of the other things I really enjoyed, so Nara is, so it's another city in Japan. It's probably about an hour from Kyoto by bullet train.
Okay.
So a few guys I met up with at the hostel, we all decided to go there. And it's got an even more ancient feel there in Kyoto. So
really,
lots of it's really good. So because one of us was obviously from Australia, and another guy was from England, and he was really tall. So just walking around the town, they mustn't get a lot of tourists because all these kids were running up to us and wanting our signatures. I think they just think the writing's cool. We felt like celebrities.
Okay, and since it was only an hour away, and you have the rail pass, it's easy enough to do as a day trip, being based out of Kyoto, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we jumped on the train maybe I think about 11 after we decided to wake up. Got to Nara, had lunch, and then walked around and checked out some of the temples around. And funny thing about Nara, they have a protected deer population around there. So there's just deer roaming the street. They're mostly tame. They do give you warnings that they can bite and kick and all that. But yeah, it's a very weird feeling just walking up to a deer and patting it.
Oh, that reminds me of my youth.
Go around them and.
Oh, I bet it was just a completely magical experience. Now, one of the things that got you interested in Japan was, of course, anime and seeing those images. While you were there, did you have an opportunity to see any manga or any movies while visiting the country?
Yeah, one of the days it was raining, so I didn't feel like going out. And Kyoto has an international manga museum. It's fairly big. I think it's like a converted school, or at least that's what it looks like. So I can't remember how much it was. It wasn't too much. I think maybe $15 once you convert it. And yeah, they've got the history of manga, how it started, and like all these fan pictures that people have done, and then just libraries and libraries of manga everywhere. I think people just go in there and sit and read for hours like a library.
Oh, very cool, very cool. If you were to recommend someone going to Kyoto and they had just a limited amount of time, what is one more thing that you think that they should not miss?
I would say one of the temples, I did miss it, and I really, really regret it. This is probably my biggest regret from Kyoto. The temple's called Kinkaku or something like that, or Golden Pavilion. So if you want to Google Golden Pavilion, you'll see what I mean. It is an amazing looking temple. It's covered in gold. They've got a pond. It's just beautiful photos, and as a photographer, I'm like, oh yeah, gotta go there. That was my number one place, and I just ran out of time.
Oh no! Well, speaking of time, if someone was just traveling around Japan, how much time do you think they should budget for Kyoto?
Depending on what they want to do. So if they want to see a lot of the temples, or because when you're traveling through Europe and you go, you see the cathedral, you see one, you see them all. So these ones are kind of different. All the temples are slightly different, but you do get to a time where you've probably had enough for the day. is a lot to do. I'd say a week if you can do it, at least. Longer, but if you're on limited time, I've thought I'd rather spend more time in Kyoto than I would in Tokyo.
Okay.
If that's a guide for anyone.
I completely understand. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Steve.
It's been a pleasure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to know more about Nathan's travels around the globe, you can follow him on Twitter. It's WEZ7, and of course, www.weswonders.com. All the information will be in the show notes over on QiRanger.com. Ladies and gentlemen, that will just about do it for this week's podcast. I want to thank Nathan Brown once more for joining us on Set Course for Adventure. You can find his information in the show notes. And if you have any comments, please share them with me, either on the blog post, in the comment section for YouTube, or you can tweet it to me at QiRanger on Twitter. And speaking of Twitter, you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. It's the same username there. You can keep up with all my adventures here in Korea as I travel around the world. But if you have feedback, if you have some comments that you really want to share with me about the podcast, you can always email those to me at podcast@QiRanger.com. So until next time, I am Steve Miller, and you be awesome.